Hello everybody and welcome back. This video we're going to be focusing on doing the island and I guess trying to clue up the kitchen a little bit. We do have a fair amount of stuff to do. We got to do the fridge and I guess the bulk of the island itself, and we're also going to put, if we just flick on the blueprint layer here, there'll be a dishwasher here, turn off shadows, and some bar stools. So we'll try and get to that, but before we do, there were some changes made in between videos, just so the bulk of this video could be focused on working on new things rather than modifying existing things. And some of those changes include, if you're following along and you want to know the exact changes, the cabinets were raised 3 inches, just to give a little bit more space in between the countertop and the bottom of the cabinets. The range hood was also heightened or raised 1 inch. And we also, kind of unrelated to the kitchen, increased the size of the deadbolt just to be a little bit bigger and a bit more substantial. And I think we changed the physical outside, maybe just increased the length. Also, sort of somewhat related to that, we raised the door handles 3 inches. And then back to the kitchen, we widened the oven door just so that it would effectively be the same width as the stove top here. That's pretty much all we did. We just dragged these sides out a little bit to sort of cover off some of the cabinet surface just so that it would, sort of blend in a bit better. We also changed the ceiling over the stairs just a little bit. Previously, this sort of cutout continued down to sort of this area. We just sort of flushed that off with the wall now so that it looks a little bit cleaner going up the stairs there. And last but not least, we reduced just a little bit the size of the cabinet knobs because they were a little bit big. I think they were about 2 inches, and now they're about 1.5 inches, maybe a little bit less. And so that will clue it up for that. So the first thing we'll move on to actually doing in this video is the fridge. So this is our fridge space, which isn't particularly big. It's about 30 inches, give or take a few eighths. So we won't really be able to do a double door because the doors will be a bit small. So what we'll do is have one main door and then have a sort of a rollout freezer underneath. And I think we're just going to make this one. We can probably pull up some reference from the warehouse just to get a good idea. And I think this one here is sort of what we're looking for. It's probably going to be a bit too wide. We'll download it anyway. Yeah, it's definitely too wide. We'll rotate it. So just try and see if we can fit this in here. And yeah, it's definitely too wide. And we could scale it down. You could just, sort of try and wedge it into that slot there. But I think we'll just go ahead and make our own, because as we've seen with, the oven and the stove in the previous parts, you do spend a lot of time sort of upscaling and remodeling a lot of the elements. And I'm not particularly a fan of how sort of square the handles are on this door. And I think we might actually use just a handle off the oven, just sort of keep that sort of style going between the door handles and things throughout the house. So what we'll do is we'll bring that over there and start a new component. We'll just draw sort of a square on the floor here, and we'll triple click that and group it, call it refrigerator, and then bring it into this area, and we'll pull it out to say 1/4 of an inch like that, and then we'll just bring this back. It doesn't need to be very precise on the back there because you're never going to see it. We'll pull this up to the bottom of the cabinets and then drag the top down, say 1 inch. See if we can get it to match up a little bit cleaner. We say 0.5, have a 1/2 inch gap on the top there, and that'll give our fridge a total height of 5'11.5", roughly 6 feet, which is essentially 72 inches. So then we'll pull this out just for the door there. We don't want the doors to be inset into the cabinets because then you can't really open them. So we'll actually control pull the front out, probably 1.5 inches. I don't think we need to go much more than that. We'll pull this out maybe 0.5 of an inch, just so it's not sort of too far in. Maybe we'll bring this up 0.25, bring this down 0.25. So we'll bring our guides back, say 1/4 of an inch. And we'll just inset this. We don't need to make it too precise. Just enough detail to make it convincing. And push it in 3/16. And this is essentially where the sort of, I guess, the weather stripping is between the door and the body of the fridge. And we'll have some sort of ventilation underneath the door. And on this particular fridge, it's 3¼ inch. So we'll say 3 inches. And then push this on through. And we can just push this in flush with that and push this up 3/16. And so now we'll have a guide come down about 1/4 of an inch from there, just so we have a little bit of space between the door and the top of the sort of the plastic vent piece. And we'll bring it down a little bit lower than that. We'll control push the front into about there, reverse that face, and then that way we can push these pieces in. I don't need to push them in very far, just a 1/16, just to create a bit more definition. And so now we have the front piece here, and we can try and sort of emulate a similar sort of style over on the bottom of this fridge, except I think we'll change it just a little bit. So we have this offset 1/2 of an inch, and if we just, I think what we'll do is we'll say 0.25, and we'll sort of do that same sort of scaling that we've done in the past, and just take these 4 lines here and scale them down to the bottom, and that'll give us 3 equal segments. Then we can just bring our lines across here like this, delete our guides. Now if we push these in, say 0.25, and then just drag the bottom line out again, it'll give us sort of a taper, and maybe not 1/4, maybe we'll only bring it in, maybe we'll just push it in a 1/16 and bring the bottom back out. Alright, and that sort of gives us a vent that we can use for the bottom there. And I suppose we don't want to have it flush with the floor, so we will bring the bottom up. Just go back into the fridge and bring the bottom up 1/8 of an inch. There we go, just to get it off the floor. So that sort of does it for the general shape. And now we can figure out where to put the freezer door. And we'll sort of just, I guess, make it a similar height as the other one. And I guess we'll use about a 1/2 inch gap here between the door and the freezer. And then push that back to the stripping. And we can push that back to the body of the fridge. And then it went in 3/16, so and then we'll have this go down 3/16 and up 3/16. Alright, so we have that. And we can move on to doing the handles. I think that looks pretty good the way it's set up there now. And so we'll do the handles, and I think what we'll do, we'll just try it at least for now. So we'll just go to the oven and delete this piece and copy the handle from here. And we can just paste it onto the surface of the refrigerator and pull it out. We can just group this. We'll say, we'll just say handle sort of generically. Rotate it to fit the freezer. So just pull in a guide here and try and find the center of this. And we'll just scale it down a little bit, just so it's not too close to the edges of the fridge, 0.96. And then we'll copy this again, rotate it this way, and we want the fridge to swing open in this direction to sort of be facing the work triangle. The sink will be over here, so you kind of want it to be that way. So we'll have it on this side. Let's bring it up to about here. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe we'll shorten the handles a little bit. And so we'll just hit make unique on these and pull in the handle end itself. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. Fairly simple, clean fridge. Maybe what we'll do, and we'll just we'll pull these out a 1/2 of an inch, 0.5. We'll go into the fridge itself and just pull the faces out another 1/2 of an inch, just to sort of thicken up the door a little bit. And I think that looks pretty good there. We can delete this fridge now, and if necessary we can go back in and add a little bit more detail later. But I think that looks pretty good the way it is. So what we'll do now is move on to the island. And so I guess there's multiple ways of going about this. We have this dotted line here, which I guess sort of indicates that's hollowed out underneath. I guess the other way of doing it would be to have this section be raised and have this section here be at the same height as the counter. But I think just for maybe counter space, we'll have it all be flush. So we'll go in, and I guess we'll draw in some just sort of temporary guides just to get an idea of the size and shape. So it'd be about there. So if we were just to draw this across, so that would be 3 feet, just so it's a little bit less arbitrary. And I guess have this dimension be 8 feet. So now we can draw in our box and pull it up to counter height right there. And there we have the very, very, very primitive box of our island. And so now we essentially need to make this look like this side sort of mirror that style and the overhang and all that stuff with the counters. So what I would like is if we were to do, let's just say, we'll copy the counter heights there. We have 1.5 inches as our counter height. And I guess what we'll do is just push this down 1.5 inches, make it a little bit easier. And then the overhang that we have, 1.5 inches that way, 1.5 inches roughly that way. So we'll stick with that 1.5 inches. Pull this out 1.5. Erase that. Same on this end. Actually, we won't. I don't think we'll do it on the back because we're going to push this in anyway. So we don't really. The overhang isn't necessary. And so most of the cabinetry has been established at sort of a 1-inch thickness. I think we'll do the same on the back here. I'm just drawing our rectangle to do both guides at once. Erase our guides. And we can push this in essentially until we see this dotted line. And see just how far in that is. It's about, we'll just say we'll make it 1 foot. So you can pull it out that extra 1/8. And now what I think would be cool is if the countertop sort of blended into the sides here. Except the issue with that is trying to figure out where the blend point is and how that essentially works. So I guess what we'll do, because it's 1 foot deep at this point, we'll just push that in 1 foot. And then I guess bring this out, draw in our inch again. We do sort of get this shape on the outside here, but I think we can live with that for now. This would sort of be the cabinet color, and this will be sort of the top color of this. And I guess at this stage, I'm thinking more of like almost like a charcoal brown color against sort of a white countertop color. And of course, the alternative here is raising this back piece up, which was kind of what we decided against doing. But I don't know. I suppose the trouble really comes from not a whole lot of space on the back here. The sort of this back piece is essentially almost entirely just for these stools. So your traffic area comes through the kitchen, and it's sort of, I guess, a shortcoming of the blueprint itself. There isn't really a whole lot of space here. And we do still have a couple of feet. You know, it's almost 3 feet that side. And I guess excluding the fridge is almost 3 feet on this side as well. If we were to do it this way, I think it would actually allow us to maybe put some ambient lighting under the front here. We could have a little bit of an overhang, and we could put some lights underneath there. So maybe we'll do that. And if we decide that we don't like it later on, maybe we can change it then. But I think for now we'll go against what we said we were going to do, and actually just do this. So put a little bit of an overhang here, maybe 2 inches, and bring this in 1 inch. And maybe we'll introduce a little bit of an overhang, not too much. We still kind of want to keep that flow that we have where the side sort of blends into the top, but we don't want to have it look too sort of unnatural. So we'll introduce just 1/4 inch of an overhang. And I think that looks a bit better. I kind of like the way that this is all looking here now. So now what we need to do is sort of introduce a hole for where the dishwasher is going to go. And according to the blueprint, it's about right there. I'll say 2 feet. And push this flush to there. And so first, we'll triple click the island. We'll group it, say, kitchen island. And we can take a box here and fill this in mostly. Triple click that, and we can say dishwasher. We can go into this now and pull it up there, and then we can just sort of adjust the sides in a little bit. So we'll say 1/4 inch on all sides, and then pull the front out maybe 1/2 inch. So we're to push the bottom up 1/4 inch. And then maybe we'll just go into X-ray view here, and we'll bring a guide back maybe 2 inches and draw a line across there. And then we can push this, or pull rather, this line down to the base, just so it sort of gives the impression of feet underneath. Bring this up 3 inches, maybe a little bit more than that, just so we do have a bit more clearance when the door is open, say 4 inches. And we want to bring it up to about, maybe make the door about 2 feet tall, and draw in 1 inch space on top, which will sort of remain in place when the door is open. And so now we can just go back and we'll say hide on the island, and then we can just sort of modify this shape as we want. So I think we'll have the door be about an 1.5 inches deep. So about there. I'll bring this in 1/4 inch and bring this out 1/4 inch. Now we just gotta find a bit of a gap here. I think we'll stick with 1/4 inch just for that sort of the weather stripping look that we had previously, and we'll actually pull it into the door on this side so we can keep that inch on top. And of course the underside isn't going to be stripped really, it's just sort of essentially where the hinge is going to be. So I can push that into there as well, and then push, I actually have to drag a line across here to there, and then bring this up 1/8 and clean up the back. And then we'll just put a little bit of a lip on the edge here. It's kind of where maybe some sort of framing would go, and pull that out 1/8 of, maybe 1/16 of an inch. Now I think we'll put a little bit of a taper along the bottom here, but nothing too extreme. Just a little bit of an obvious edge, and maybe the same on top as well. And then we'll just box off the front here, pull that out 1/16 of an inch, so we can just control push this line back to there, reverse that face, and then just push these in. And now we can basically just put, we find the center point here, we can just put a little touch panel, and we'll say, I guess 3 inches either side here, and maybe 2 inches down. And maybe we'll center it a little bit more. I don't want to put it right in the middle, leave it more towards the top. And then we can just push this in 1/16 of an inch. And that will do it for the dishwasher. So we just go up to and unhide last. Then we have our counter back. And now what we'll do, that we have that complete, go back into the counter and add in our 1 inch sort of spacer. And then immediately we'll mirror the kick space, which I believe was 4 inches. So we'll just go back in here and put in our 4 inch space, drag in 1 inch from this end, that, and then it went in. How far did it go in? And it does say it's a 2 inch space underneath here on this side, but I think we'll actually push that in another inch, because 2 inches isn't really a whole lot. So we'll go ahead and do that on this side as well, 3 inches. So now we can move on to the sink. And this, I think we'll do sort of an undermounted sink for this one, which essentially means that the countertop is cut out and the sink is sort of mounted underneath, rather than it having a sort of a lip that goes around the edges here. And so we'll have it bringing a couple inches, 5 inches, maybe a little bit less than that, bring down another inch, and then also over a couple of inches from that, just so we have a bit of a space to mount it. I'll say about 15 inches deep, about there, and then it'll be a sort of a double sink. So we will say, I want it to be a bit narrower than it is deep, so we'll say maybe 13 inches, maybe 12 inches. So yeah, so what we have there is about 13 inch sides and a 1 3/16 space in the middle here. So then we can just draw in the shape in our counter here and push that through to what is the bottom. That should be 1.5 inches, but of course because it's a solid box, there is no underneath. So now we can control push a little bit, and we can just delete this so that we keep our counter line. And then essentially just find the deepness that we want. And we'll give it a depth of about 8 inches. And then we can find where our middle piece would line up and pull this across to here. And then we'll just reverse all of these faces. And I think what we'll do is we'll separate the counter from the sink. So we'll just grab all of our sink pieces like that and delete. And then we can fill in our counter again, so we know where it's supposed to be. And there we go. And then we can just paste this back in and find this corner piece. Now we can group it, we'll just say kitchen sink. And so I think what we'll do at this stage is figure out a way to sort of round these corners in. And I think we don't want to have it be too round, maybe 0.5 of an inch is enough. But we also don't want it to be square. And we'll just leave it at the default 12 for now. And keep it on the purple sort of recommended line, I guess. There we go. And we can delete that now, delete the guides. And we'll just clean up these lines. I'll bring this down 8 inches deep. And we'll just fill some of these lines back in because they were already there. SketchUp sort of erased them, but that's fine. And we could use the round corner tool, which is this panel right here, which you can get. If not on the extension warehouse, then just off Google, and you can refer to my how to install extensions video for that if you have any questions. But I think what we might do is if we were to just pull in a 1/2 inch this way and that way, and then I guess we'll have to draw a line in top and bottom, and then we can create sort of a center point there, get our arc tool, and create the same angle that we had on the other corners. Just grab this, grab the follow me tool right here, and then we can just, if we just grab this, we can sort of drag it around the edge of the bottom. Or what we could do is if we click the base and then click this, that will automatically fill in the area that we selected. So now we can just go in and see why we have some of these weird lines clipping through, and it's actually some of these faces aren't filled in for some reason. I suppose it's probably a byproduct of how many faces are being used in that particular area of the model. So I think what we'll have to do is we'll try this again, but we'll try 6 faces this time instead of the usual 12, and it will look a little bit worse, but I think it'll help the corners a little bit, and yeah, of course it has done. This one is still, it's got a weird shadow going on, but it is filled, so we will leave it for now. And then we'll do sort of the same thing over on this one, and that's that done. So then we can go into the countertop again, and then we'll just round this corner out a little bit. So we'll follow that 1/2 inch guideline. And then we'll make sure we go back to, we'll say 20 faces for the top here, as this is a bit more visible than the base of the sink. Now instead of deleting this and pushing each one down, we can just push down the middle here, and we'll bring that down the 1.5 inches that it needs, and then delete that. And then we can just erase these square corners. And I think what we'll do, just to help create a bit more definition, is pull this down maybe a 1/16 of an inch, like that. And then we'll go back out here again, and we'll hide the counter, and then go back into the sink. Drag a line out 1 inch, and then we can just sort of go around the edges like this, and we can just fill that in, erase these little bits. And then we can focus on maybe rounding the top, so we'll just grab this top piece, and then we'll say maybe an 1/8 of an inch. We won't do 12 sides, we'll just do 6. We'll just hit OK, and that's what this looks like. And I think we'll just go around and soften up some of these edges, to make it look a bit more, I guess, rounded. And you can smooth these lines by using the eraser tool, but make sure you have the Shift key selected, as it won't erase faces, but it will erase the lines that those faces are connected to. And I think that looks pretty good. And now what we need to do is our tap and also sort of the drains. But what we can do there, we'll just draw a little shape into the base of the sink, and we'll find a decent spot to put the drain. I think right there is pretty good. And then just try and find the center of our sink. So we'll take our 40-sided circle and drag this out 0.75, and then say 2 inches, and just make sure that these faces are separate from the rest of the sink. And we'll just push this down, say 1/4 of an inch. Then we want to push this down another 0.5 under that. We'll now delete this face and control push it so that we can have those faces be separate, and then scale this in from the corner down to say 0.75, and bring this down to 0.5, and taper that in, say a 1/16 of an inch, and then push this down, say 6 inches, just sort of so it goes beyond view from most angles. And then we'll copy this style over on this side, and those will be our drains. We'll leave them like that for now. I think actually what we'll do, just to make them look a bit more maybe realistic, is we'll take our offset tool and we'll say 1/4 of an inch, and then from there we'll say another 1/16 of an inch, and then we can push this down a 1/16 of an inch, and we'll give it a little bit of a taper around the edges, sort of to make the drain look like it was added in rather than part of the actual base of the sink. And maybe they're a bit wide, so I think what we'll do is we'll just grab this, deselect the base, and then we can just scale this down to say 0.9, like that. And we can do the same on this one. to make the drains a little bit more realistically sized, I suppose. And now we can do the tap. So we'll take our tape measure tool, bring this back 2 inches, and I want to make sure that the faucet itself isn't sort of rubbing off the counter there. So we'll drag that to the middle, and we'll say 50 faces, and bring this out an inch, so we have a sort of a 2-inch base on the faucet, and pull this up 5 inches, maybe a little less than that, bring it down another inch. And we'll do an offset on the bottom here, 1/8 of an inch, pull that up 1/4, and we'll just bring up our guides from here so we can find a center point on the top of this, and then we can now reduce the amount of faces we have to about 30, and then we can say 0.4 of an inch either direction. Just draw a little cross in the middle of our circle here, just so we know where the middle is. And we can just drag a line up, and we can sort of gauge where we want our faucet to be. And so we can pick the height, and we'll have it be maybe about 1 foot, maybe a little bit higher than that, I guess. And then we can pick sort of the angle that it comes in on, and I think we'll do about there. Erase our guides, maybe pull this out a little bit, and so now we can use our center point. We'll take our arch tool, and we'll put in, say, 40 faces, and then we'll just find a comfortable angle between this and the other side, and we'll just do it right on the blue there. And we'll just find our line there and shorten it to about here. That's where the faucet head will go. And so now what we can do is take this piece, and again with the Follow Me tool, and essentially just draw the line around this pipe, and that will give us our faucet shape. And I think what we'll actually do now is just make this a little bit smaller, do about there, and strip this down to there. We can offset this in a little bit, about there. Alright, grab this bottom circle and pull it flush. We can reverse that face. And so now before we start erasing unrelated components, we will triple click all this stuff, and we'll say tap or kitchen tap, and then we'll just go into sort of the center of the tap there and triple click the line in the middle and erase that. And maybe we'll bring this out a tiny bit, just taper the edge about there. And now essentially what we need to do is create the tap, or the end of the faucet, or the head. And what we'll do there is create using, I guess 40 faces is maybe a 2.5 inch faucet head, and we can pull that up to maybe about 5/16 maybe. And if we just draw this across here, try and find the center point again, this will allow us to give a little bit of detail to the end. We'll draw this up, maybe make it about 4 inches, maybe a little bit less than that, maybe about here. And it's about 0.8 of an inch is what the actual faucet is. But if we bring it out to about, say, here, like that, and then again bring it in a little bit inside the edge, take our arc tool again, we can taper it right there. There we go. And it's a little bit obviously fatter now than we need it. We can click this, we'll say kitchen tap head. We can try and find a way to place this, scale it down a little bit, and rotate it. I think that looks pretty good. What we will do maybe is just make it a little bit longer, so we'll drag it up to about there, and just leave it, pull it down. There we go. Now we can go into this again, reverse that face, and pull the edge in a little bit, and just push this up. You don't need to do a whole lot of detail with that right now, but we will do the sort of the handle, and the way we'll do that is, I think, sort of do it crossways. So we'll take our circle tool again with our 40 faces, and this right now, if you just look at this, it's about 1.5. So we'll do sort of the same thing, 1.25, like that. And we'll drag this out about there. Then we'll group this now. We'll say kitchen tap handle, rotate it 90 degrees, and then just sort of find an intersection point here. Probably scale this down a little bit as well. We do want it to be a little bit bigger than, but not too much bigger than the base. We can go into this again and drag this a little bit along. Now I think what we'll do beyond this edge here is we'll actually pull this out 1/16 of an inch, and then over 1/16, and just erase that end piece. So now what we'll do is bring this in 1/16, and then we can push this along to essentially where we want the handle to begin, maybe about here. Then we can pull it out again 1/16, and bring it along just to leave a little bit of a gap so we know where it is. And now we can match this side with the other side. So we'll pull this out 16th, and I guess push it along this way 16th. We can erase that edge, reverse that face. Now we'll make the actual handle, and that'll just be sort of a circular bar. We'll just make sort of a quick shape, and we probably don't need 40 faces for this. We'll say 30, and that's 1/4 of an inch, so it'll be about 1/2 of an inch thick, maybe a little bit more than that, 5/16. Pull it up, say 4 inches, and that is a bit thicker than I was thinking, so maybe we'll scale it down. Right there, and we'll find a center. I think we'll make it even a bit thinner than that. Right there. Drag it back up. And for both of these edges, we'll put a little bit of a taper on them. So about there, not too much. Drag it down a 32nd. Sort of the same maybe on this one. So now we'll group all of it, and we'll just say kitchen tap full. And just looking at it now, it is a little bit sort of small maybe compared to other elements of the kitchen. So I think what we'll do is we'll just take the whole thing here and scale it up to about there. Make sure that it's still touching the base. And it is. And so I think this is coming along. So now we can move on to doing the cupboards and drawers on the front here. And we will mimic the style that was used over on this side. So we can bring this down. Get 1/8 of an inch space from the top here. The drawers themselves were 5 and 5/16. And so now it's just a matter of figuring out how many we're actually going to have along this distance. And we have a space of 5'9". So we'll actually try and just copy these doors exactly, and we'll utilize this space we have left over at the end. So it's 1'4" and 1/16. The space that we have left over is 4.5 inches. And so maybe what we'll do instead there is if we were to make this, say, 5 inches, I think we could probably utilize that space a bit better. So we'll say 5 inches on that end. I'll bring this over 1 inch so that we have that space, and then it's going to have to be another 1/8 of an inch. So then we'll just say 2-inch sections, and we'll find a way to scale in 4 doors here. Scale that over to here. There we go, and then we'll just do our 16th either direction of one of these, and that'll give us our 1/8-inch space. So now we'll take our line tool and start drawing some of these in. We'll complete that face, drawing these drawers, and we'll just box this in. And then start drawing some of these cupboards. So pushed in 1 inch. So we'll do the same here. And so now we'll find sort of an evenly spaced amount of these. If we were to drag them up, say 5, and create an even amount of space, let's just see how many we can fit in. So we can fit 5 in right up to the top of the counter. And we'll have to drag them down a little bit. So the easiest way to do that then is to just create basically 5 equal parts. So we'll drag this out 1 inch. Create parts like this and scale them up to the top, and then just create our 1/2-inch spacers either side of this. There we go. Now we can erase our guides, and we'll push these back in. We'll say 16 inches, and then inset these a little bit as well, maybe 1/4 of an inch. There we go, and that'll give us an extra little wine rack on the end there. I think that looks pretty good. And so that does it for the cabinets. And then grab the handles and knobs. So you should just drag one of these over. And so now we'll find our center points. And if you keep it on the red line on the pull over or green line, I guess depending on the way that you pull it, it should be center, top, and bottom. So we don't need to drag any one of those. So we'll just keep it on the line there. And I suppose, I guess looking at this now, we're not going to need these 2 handles here because there's a sink here, which means both of these drawers can't really exist. So instead of putting in those handles, I guess we'll just put in sort of a fake panel. And maybe I guess we could leave both of those like that. It's probably the most inconspicuous way of doing it. So we'll leave it like that. And then I guess we'll just pull over some of these handles and keep it on the same axis. And then pull them into the lines. And find sort of a center point. I think that looks pretty good. We'll drag these over to here as well. Try to find a rough center point. About there. I think that looks pretty good. Alright, and I think that does it for both of those. And that will do it for the counter. But I guess as one last little thing that we'll add in here is the bar stools to put on the back of the counter itself. And so what we'll go with for now is maybe 26-inch high, we'll say 40 faces. And this will sort of represent the top of the bar stool, and we can kind of use this sketch as a little bit of a guide. Say 5 inches, 6 inches. Yeah, we'll have about a foot across. And this will represent sort of the top of the seat. And I guess we'll use a few more faces than that. We'll say 60 faces to make it a little bit less rigid looking. Pull this up 2 inches, and we'll bring this up 24 inches. And maybe a little bit more than that. Let's bring them up to about, say, here. And so now this can be our bar stool. So we'll have that triple clicked. We'll just say kitchen bar stool, and we'll go into it. And so now we'll take one of these rings and we'll drag it down about here or so, and we'll scale it up just a little bit. And while we have that there, we'll just grab our circle tool and make sure we're on the red face. And we don't need 60 faces. We'll say 20 for this. Put it about here, 7/16. We'll have it be about maybe roughly an inch across total, ½ inch there, and then I guess we'll cut the top off of it a little bit like that. And then what we can do, so just click our circle, grab the follow me tool, and that'll create our shape. Reverse these faces. And so that will essentially be sort of the footrest area of the bar stool. Maybe we'll have these go up a little bit higher than that, because these are kind of going to be metal, maybe metal bar stool. What we'll do is bring that in a little bit, and then we can taper this edge. So grab this, pull it down, say 1/16. Don't want it to be too much. We can pull this in 1/8 of an inch, and then push this up to about there. And now we basically need to make the leg. And we'll just go with sort of a simple circular leg shape for this. We'll bring this back up to 30 faces. And while we're outside the component, we can just drag this out. We'll say 0.75, and then we can push this down to the floor. Triple click this, and we'll say kitchen bar stool leg. And that way we can copy these components around the outside of this bar stool and mirror the shape. So we don't need to make 4 bar stool legs individually. And we'll just push this out to the edge a little bit, about there. And we can go into the component, and we'll grab the bottom and scale it down a little bit, just so it has a bit of a taper. And while we're also doing that, we'll grab the bottom, and this will allow us to sort of scale it out a little bit. And we'll just drag it out so that the leg is just sort of on the outside of the ring that we have. Maybe we'll have it go to the inside, so there's a little bit less of a taper. And I think the top is a little bit too fat, so we'll scale this down, maybe about there, and then we'll actually push the top down so that it's just on the inside of the stool there. I can push this in, say 1/8 of an inch, so it's not touching the side underneath there. And so now we can replicate this leg essentially every 90 degrees. And we'll just draw a line in here to try and find the center point of this circle. And then that way we can use these 4 edges essentially as a reference for where to put the legs. And try and keep the distance on here the same. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. So we can go back into the top of the stool and erase that center. Just have a look at what the stool itself looks like. So we grab all these components, rotate it 45 degrees, then group it, say kitchen bar stool full. And if we want, we can adjust it a little bit. We can maybe scale it up or down, sort of how we please. And I think maybe bring it down a tiny bit. Now we'll replicate this. So we can just take this, drag it over to, say, here, and say X3, so that we have 3 more rather than just 1 more. And so there we have our bar stools for the back of the counter. I think that looks pretty good. So what we'll do now is go in and draw the floor back in. And there we go. Just hide this panel. So that will do it for the island and all of its extra little components. And we can probably go in and add a little bit more detail to some of these elements a little later on. But for now, I think that's actually pretty good. We got a lot done this part. The refrigerator done, we got the sink and the counter done, all the cabinets, dishwasher, and the bar stools. So it's been a pretty productive episode, and we'll go ahead and leave it there. And next time we can probably move on to the living space, do some of the furniture, maybe some of the door frames and stuff like that. But that will do it for this video. Thank you everybody for watching. I'll see you next time. Hello everybody and welcome back. This video we're going to be focusing on doing the island and I guess trying to clue up the kitchen a little bit. We do have a fair amount of stuff to do. We've got to do the fridge and I guess the bulk of the island itself, and we're also going to put, if we just flick on the blueprint layer here, there'll be a dishwasher here, turn off shadows, and some bar stools. So we'll try and get to that, but before we do, there were some changes made in between videos, just so the bulk of this video could be focused on working on new things rather than modifying existing things. And some of those changes include, if you're following along and you want to know the exact changes, the cabinets were raised 3 inches, just to give a little bit more space in between the countertop and the bottom of the cabinets. The range hood was also heightened or raised 1 inch. And we also, kind of unrelated to the kitchen, increased the size of the deadbolt just to be a little bit bigger and a bit more substantial. And I think we changed the physical outside, maybe just increased the length. Also, sort of somewhat related to that, we raised the door handles 3 inches. And then back to the kitchen, we widened the oven door just so that it would effectively be the same width as the stove top here. That's pretty much all we did. We just dragged these sides out a little bit to sort of cover off some of the cabinet surface just so that it would, sort of blend in a bit better. We also changed the ceiling over the stairs just a little bit. Previously, this sort of cutout continued down to sort of this area. We just sort of flushed that off with the wall now so that it looks a little bit cleaner going up the stairs there. And last but not least, we reduced just a little bit the size of the cabinet knobs because they were a little bit big. I think they were about 2 inches, and now they're about 1.5 inches, maybe a little bit less. And so that will clue it up for that. So the first thing we'll move on to actually doing in this video is the fridge. So this is our fridge space, which isn't particularly big. It's about 30 inches, give or take a few eighths. So we won't really be able to do a double door because the doors will be a bit small. So what we'll do is have one main door and then have a sort of a rollout freezer underneath. And I think we're just going to make this one. We can probably pull up some reference from the warehouse just to get a good idea. And I think this one here is sort of what we're looking for. It's probably going to be a bit too wide. We'll download it anyway. Yeah, it's definitely too wide. We'll rotate it. So just try and see if we can fit this in here. And yeah, it's definitely too wide. And we could scale it down. You could just, sort of try and wedge it into that slot there. But I think we'll just go ahead and make our own because as we've seen with, the oven and the stove in the previous parts, you do spend a lot of time sort of upscaling and remodeling a lot of the elements. And I'm not particularly a fan of how sort of square the handles are on this door. And I think we might actually use just to handle off the oven, just sort of keep that sort of style going between the door handles and things throughout the house. So what we'll do is we'll bring that over there and start a new component. We'll just draw a sort of a square on the floor here. And we'll triple click that and group it, call it refrigerator, and then bring it into this area. And we'll pull it out to 1/4 inch, like that. And then we'll just bring this back. It doesn't need to be very precise on the back there because you're never going to see it. We'll pull this up to the bottom of the cabinet.